honestly, man, I've been involved in relationship conversations since 1989, Shahrazad Ali College campus. I've always been in the mix with relationships, but that's what's taken off here. So, and that's what kind of led to this new burst of popularity. Just having the same conversation that we have on the basketball court, the barbershop, golf course, and I'm telling women what men really wish they could say, but they can't say this stuff in the corporate environment. I've been there.
Right.
You'll get canceled. You'll get Me Too. You'll get hostile work environmented. And so many women are not understanding what the disconnect is. So what I'm saying is, I'm like, well, the kind of men you want are these guys, and this is what they want from women. And are you willing to do that? Or if not, at least now you know why the disconnect is. So that's about as simple as I can put it. Simon Cowell on American Idol was allowed to become a multi-millionaire. And he is the reason the show was as successful as it was.
And we wouldn't be talking about him if he wasn't abrasive with his commentary.
Bars.
Howard Stern was the pioneer of the shock jock kind of thing, and even to a lesser degree, Gordon Ramsay. And I ask people, is it my tone or is it the fact that I'm right? And my tone just gives you a reason to not like it. Because 2 + 2 is 4 no matter who's saying it. There was a woman by the name of Sue Ellen Browder who used to write for Cosmopolitan back in the 70s and 80s. And she wrote a book called Subverted. And she admitted that in the 60s and 70s, Cosmopolitan, which was Playboy for women at the time, they openly lied to women, selling them this Sex in the City lifestyle. And I did a podcast on how, feminism and that kind of stuff was supposed to be about one thing: women having choice. If you want to be a housewife, that's your choice. If you want to be a corporate woman, that's your choice. And I think everybody can get on board with that. But when we've told women in particular, you can have it all. You can have everything. You can bring home the bacon fried up in pan, never let you forget you were a man, I'm a woman, Anjali. That's the 1970s, and that kept going on and on and on. But we as men, we know that ain't right. You step to Hottie over at the bar and you find out real quick where you rank.
Bars.
Real quick. So men get a dose of reality often, and then when we took away competition, when we start putting all these participation trophies, you get a trophy at the spelling bee just because you showed up. Well, it has an effect upon people, in particular upon women, because women by nature want to consolidate on the highest value man possible. It's in their nature. But now you've completely deregulated the sexual marketplace. There are no rules. And now you have social media and all these dating apps. So now if you're a man in the top 10, top 20%, you have almost 100% of women wanting men who can produce this outcome, which is massively unrealistic. You want a man who's making at least 6 figures. That's only 10% of the population, 14%. And coming from Oklahoma, the Bible Belt, factory worker family, military family, I'm like, yeah, I fit in this category, but I also take exception to you looking at my brothers and saying, hey, these guys aren't good because they're average, but then you get upset when I call you average.
Yeah, and you end up with this sort of weird structure where you have all like a handful, the top 5 or 10% of men, and they're attracting a huge percentage of the attractive, eligible women, even though they have no interest in having a serious relationship with them. And then you have this other big chunk of men who now, like the media will call them incels, or something along those lines, that are a little frustrated with the arrangement because they sort of see the world working this way, and they realize that even the women that they perceive as being on their approximate level of value are quite often not interested with any guy who is sort of near the lower end of the spectrum, right?
I spent the better part of a year and a half talking to guys called incels. They were labeled incels, but they don't want to be. They want women. They can't get them because women aren't paying them any attention. And see, those guys got mischaracterized as neckbeard, Cheeto-eating dudes living in their mother's basement. I'm like, no. I know guys who are 40 years old making $160,000 as software engineers who are decent-looking guys, but they have no real social skills, so they're not being prioritized because it keeps getting pushed to the margins, the margins of men. And so I started off talking originally to men, my clients who are in image, and then I also started realizing I had an influx of these incel guys, and I thought that they were guys who were economically unattractive. That's the new word. No, these guys are solidly middle class or upper middle class. I'm like, so what the hell's going on? Does everyone have to have 6 figures and be a superhero? And that's really what you find out when you start asking women, what do you want? And my sales background and my way of probing and active listening and asking questions, I can finally get people to just tell me what you want, not what you'll accept. And what you're finding is from GED to PhD, women are wanting 2 to 3 kids. They don't want to have to work to pay significant bills, or they only want to have to work to pay 20% or less than the family bill. So you still want a provider male. That ain't the way this country's set up. Most people, you need 2 incomes, and then you're saying these guys aren't good enough. I'm talking to a woman in college and I asked her, could you date a plumber? And off the rip, she said no. I'm like, you know how much plumbers make?
Yeah, it's a great job.
But I'm like, but it was the fact that not only do you want a guy, now you're discriminating where his money comes from.
Right.
It's insane, and that's what this show is starting to highlight, starting to break apart a lot of this delusion. Because when you feed an appetite, it's no different than drugs. Let me give you a few hits for free, and then now you're gonna buy it. They've been sold on this idea that you don't want a high value man, which is 6 different things. It's not just money. What you really want is this lifestyle. But then I asked, well, what are you bringing to the table, and what kind of relationship skills, and what are he's gonna get? That's where the crickets happen. So now it's really started a conversation that's much needed. We have gotten to the point to where, for the most part, we don't even know how to relate to one another. We know how to swipe left, swipe right, hook up, and get on. We're talking about women right now. Women want the outcome, but they don't want the work. And I'm saying, okay, well, at what point do men start making this 6 figures? You know that's at 45 to 55, right? So you're 22. You want a man in it? Oh, now you want him to be young and in the top 10%. And a certain, it's like, to the point to where they're starting to sit back and say, you know what? This is unrealistic and it's unsustainable, because most people aren't there. And even if you can get there from a look standpoint, there's only one. And what are you going to do to get it? So it's a much needed conversation, because look, even the guys that are up there, they're just normal guys too. I'm like, you do realize their breath stinks in the morning. They have bad habits. You know, driven, motivated guys, you think they're going to be at home to go to the PTA meeting? They're working 12, 14, 16-hour days. You know, being a high-value man's wife is a lonely life. And you got to, not lonely, but you're not going to have everything. And that's, I think, what's happened. We've told everybody you can have everything. You can be whatever you want, and there's no limit. So now you have people thinking they can have it all when they're average. And then that leads to frustration and depression. When your expectation doesn't line up with reality, people get frustrated. Then you got guys who, hearing these women saying, I couldn't date a guy making $50,000. Like, that's an insult. Like, half of the men in this country make $50,000. That's the median income. So I'm like, so what are we ultimately saying to people? That the only way you're worth anything is if you're over here. Okay, well, are you planning on sharing these guys? I mean, what are you planning on doing?
Right.
And so now what it's starting to do is it's starting to make this conversation front and center, because before it was just a one-way conversation. And finally, men are what men want is being heard.